Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone that's coming in. Welcome, welcome. Great to have you with us. This is our panel event on starting and sustaining an intentional community. And we have 4 wonderful panelists with us here today who all represent intentional communities, eco-villages, co-housings all across the United States. And we're really happy to have each of you here with us. And my name is Cynthia. I'm going to be the host and moderator for today's event. I am the communications director with FIC, the Foundation for Intentional Community. And I'm calling in from Vermont, where I live at an eco-village called Headwaters in central Vermont. And I'm going to kick things off. Looks like we have about 40 or so attendees here with us. Welcome to each of you. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. I have a pretty short little intro piece. Okay, so once again, this is the panel event on starting and sustaining a community with Los Angeles Eco Village, Heathcote Community, Ganas Community, and Liberty Village. And we're going to hear a lot more about each of these very special places shortly. We are in Zoom webinar mode, so that means I'm going to really want you to use the webinar features that we have through Zoom. Please use the chat as the main way to communicate with each other and ask questions of the entire group. So you can use the chat to introduce yourself, you can share your name, where you're calling from, if you live in an intentional community or you're starting a community. I know we have many course participants of our Starting an Intentional Community online course with us. So if you have a community name for your group already, please put that in the chat. And also share what you hope to learn or get out of this session. That will be really helpful for me as I'm moderating the discussion to get a sense of what you're most interested in learning. And please do use the raise your hand feature if you want to ask a question verbally. Click on this button. I'll be able to see that your hand is raised and I can unmute you to speak. And then if you have questions that are specifically for the panelists, I encourage you to put those into this Q&A box. And that'll help me, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions, that'll help me be able to keep track of all the questions. So put your questions for the chat in the chat that are for, people in the chat, maybe asking advice for resources, and Q&A is specifically questions for our panelists. Okay, and now I want to share about some upcoming events that we have. So more opportunities like this one to learn about intentional community and network. Tomorrow we have a workshop with Terry on bringing your authentic self to community. So I think this session is ideal for someone who is looking to live in a community or already does live in a community and wants to know how to bring more of themselves, bring more authentic self-expression with different communication modalities and tools. Living in community is an opportunity to be your true self, and Terry has a lot of wisdom about how you can do that. So that's going to be tomorrow from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. And then on Tuesday, we have our monthly Community Connect call. And this is a great opportunity to network. This is not in webinar mode, it's in meeting mode. So there's like 50 people from all across the country, all around the world, who are all really enthusiastic about intentional community. And this is kind of our monthly meet and greet. We have some group activities. We're going to have some presenters for this one from our BIPOC Council in honor of Black History Month. That's this month. So it's going to be a fun time. I hope you'll join us on February 23rd. I also want to share about some upcoming courses we have at ic.org/learn. We just got up onto the website 3 new courses for community seekers and starters. And the first of which is a course that I'm hosting called Find Community: How to Join and Live an Intentional Community. That's going to be a 5-week online course starting on March 11th. And we do have an early bird discount for this course. So if you get the course before February 27th, it'll be $100 off. So I encourage you to register soon if you want to get in and get that discount. We're also going to be hosting an information session. So if you have questions about what the course is about, I'm going to be there, happy to answer any and all questions. And that's going to be on February 25th on the Thursday. We also have the Art of Facilitation for Cooperative Groups. That's going to be with Laird Shop. And it's going to be a real deep dive into the art and practice of facilitation from someone who's done it for decades. And it's specifically going to be geared towards intentional communities and the kinds of things you're going to need to be aware of and looking out for as you're facilitating processes and meetings with your community. So I really recommend this one for those of you who are on that journey of starting a community. And that's going to be followed up. So this is March 11th. And then in April, we're going to have a follow-up course to the facilitation one, also taught by Laird, and it's going to be Working Constructively with Conflict in Community. So we're offering these two courses as a bundle, so you do get a bit of a discount if you sign up for both of them together. And this one's going to be focused on how to handle conflict. Conflict is inevitable. Conflict happens in community. I'm sure all of our panelists can relate to this. And it's good to know and be prepared of how to handle it. So Laird's going to walk you through all aspects of how to navigate conflict in community. Okay, so all of those online courses are at ic.org/learn. We're about to head into this 2-hour session here shortly with our panelists. So I'm going to invite you as we get started here to remove any distractions, maybe have something to drink with you. We won't be taking any breaks, so do take care of your self-care needs. Have any note-taking materials you'd like. We will be sharing the recording of this session with everyone afterwards, but not the presentation slides necessarily, so do be sure to take notes if you want. And yeah, just sort of center yourself, arrive, let go of whatever else happened earlier in your day and settle in to give your full attention to our 4 wonderful presenters. The way this is going to work is that each presenter will have an opportunity to present about their community for about 8 minutes or so. Then we'll have 5 minutes for you all to ask questions of that presenter who just went. And then after that, we're going to move into some more general panel discussion on this topic of how do you start a community? How do you sustain a community over decades? You know, what advice do you have for people who are on that journey? And then the last part of our session will just be opened up to Q&A for however long as we have. So yeah, feel free to ask any and all questions. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first presenter. This is Lois Arkin of the Los Angeles Eco Village. And Lois is a co-founder of Los Angeles Eco Village, which was founded in 1933, which happens to be the year I was born. So this is a community that has a really rich history and is also in an urban context, which I find so fascinating. So Lois, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I think we need to make sure you're unmuted.
Unmute.
Got it.
Point.
All right, so take us away. Tell us about yourself and your community.
Well, when I first heard you just say when we were founded, because I'm a little bit hard of hearing. I thought you said 1937. And I thought, wow, no, that's the year I was born. And tomorrow's my 84th birthday. So, so that was kind of cute. But anyway, no, yes, you're right. We were founded on the ground in this location in 1993. So we're in our 28th year now, I believe, if my arithmetic is serving me right. And so our vision, even from the very beginning, was to reinvent how we live in the city. How are we going to do that? Well, we are going to take our lessons from permaculture to a large extent. We're going to, look at connections. What are the relationships between the social, the economic, and the ecological systems of our neighborhood? What are the challenges of our neighborhood? At the time that we were founded in this location, I had already lived in the neighborhood for 13 years. So I had a presence here. I had never expected to live here that long, but as it turned out, that's how long I lived here. And in the year before we decided to do it here, we had been, had the Rodney King Uprisings in Los Angeles, which to remember was the first time that a brutal police beating of an African-American man went viral. And of course, since then, that time, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And so we are still struggling with that everywhere in the country. But nonetheless, so we had planned to have it someplace else as a new construction, $50 million, 25-year eco-village, about still within the heart of the city, but in a kind of a rural feel of the city. But then after those uprisings, we just decided to do it in Lois's neighborhood, said my 20-member planning committee. And so we began, and it was 3 years on the ground before we bought our first building. Today we own 3 multifamily buildings, 50 units of permanently affordable housing, including a limited equity housing cooperative, a community land trust that owns the land underneath those buildings, a 4th property, which is a commercial in the process of becoming a community hub, a former auto shop, I'm happy to say, no more cars there. And a variety of other issues as well. A 1/4-acre learning garden. We're intensely urban, not just urban, but we are the most densely populated area in the country, including in our area, more densely populated than New York City as a whole, not just Manhattan, but of New York City. So we're pretty, no, no, I know we're going to hear from New York. So it's, and then we're also very transit rich. We're within walking distance of 20 bus lines and 2 subway stops. And so today we have 40 members of our intentional community, but within a 2-block neighborhood of about 500 people in 13 multifamily buildings. Now, as I mentioned, we only own 3 of them, but someday you wait and see. And how did we do it all? Without any bank loans. No, we just started in the mid 80s, because my organization actually goes back to 1980 rather than, even though we didn't start the Eco Village till 1993. But in the mid 80s, we started some experiments with alternative financial systems. And one of them was to create an ecological revolving loan fund. And we ended up using that to borrow money from our friends and neighbors and relatives and whoever knew us that believed in us would loan us money, and they did over these past 35 years, because the loan fund started about 10 years before the Eco Village. So we borrowed over $2 million now, and again, as I said, never had to use banks to buy our property. So we are still, you know, we still welcome loans now, and we think that this is a great time for people to really have a sense of where their money is and what it's doing. Because if you've got spare money to loan or to invest, and you're doing it in the open markets, that who knows where the money is going, who knows what it's doing, who knows anything about, you know, it traveling at the light of speed. So this way people can come actually visit their money and see what it's doing. So that's one of the great systems that we have. But again, in everything we've done, we tried to make the connections and demonstrate the connections between and among the ecological systems, the social systems, and the economic systems of our community. And so that's about kind of a wrap up of it. And we'll talk a lot more about how that all came to be as well. How am I doing on time, Tina?
We still have about 2 minutes if there's anything
Oh,
else.
yay. I asked you to let me know when it's about 2 minutes. So some of the other things that happen here in LA Eco Village, we have a bicycle repair shop. There is a tool shop, an art studio, a gym. As I said, many small, one large community garden called the Learning Garden on the 1/4 acre site. And then we have just numerous smaller gardens around all of our 3 buildings and our commercial property as well. In the commercial property, we're planning that to be a real community hub with an eco co-op hostel where people can come in groups from and have an experience in urban sustainable living together, and then take back to their groups what they've learned, whether they're an academic group or a civic organization or a faith-based group and so forth like that. But we'll also have a little learning nursery. It's also a brownfield, so we're very excited about working with UC Riverside's Department of Environmental Toxicology on how to remediate brownfields, that is land that is contaminated because it was an auto shop, in such a way that you're not just digging and hauling it away and making it someone else's problem, but you're actually learning how to remediate it with microorganisms and fungi and other kinds of plants and trees, and then be able to get a city policy and regulation around that, so the many hundreds, thousands of brownfield sites in our city and in other cities too can be remediated by people who live there and not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of public money to do it. So that's kind of one of our really exciting future plans. And I intend to live to be 100, much as I'm celebrating my 84th birthday tomorrow. And I think that's kind of why we bought this property, is so I'd have something to do, because the intentional community really doesn't need me anymore, and most founders would have left long ago. So I'm planning to stick around, close the street down, sit in a rocking chair and talk to the passersby about, oh, what I've been doing here the last 50 years or so. So that's about my input for right now, and I'll take some questions from you.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you, Lois. It's wonderful to hear about all you have accomplished, and just so much congratulations to you and your community. It's incredible. And
mostly it's been fun.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. Yes, it's good to hear for all the people who are thinking of starting a community now. At the end of the long road, you'll look back and say, it's mostly been fun. That's good.
Yeah. So do we have some questions in the chat? Or?
We do. We have quite a few. So
do you want to read it to me, or?
I will. So some people want to know more about the loan fund. How did that work? What was the return on people's investment?
Well, it's worked quite well. Initially, we were paying when interest rates were at like 8 and 10 and 12% back in the mid 80s. We were paying we were paying quite a bit, like 5 or 6%. And that was that was really low interest at that time. I think we actually got a loan from the FIC and also the FEC, which was great. And one of those loans was at 8%. And we were very happy to get rid of that loan eventually, but it came in very handy. Today, we pay 1.5%. And we pay the interest out quarterly. And you can also read, there's a fact sheet on the on our ELF, our Ecological Revolving Loan Fund, on our website. And you can go to it, laecovillage.org or laev.org. We're very easy to find, both our website and of course on YouTube. You can see many, many videos about us. So that's it. And our loans are, you know, we have a regular loan agreement. It was originally, the loan agreement that I actually wrote was 6 pages long, but actually one of our dear colleagues and friends shortened it to a half page. So that's what we've been using. And he loaned us $100,000, I think, at one time. So so we decided to just shorten it to a half a page, and it's worked. And we always encourage our lenders to talk to other lenders that have actually loaned. And again, we pay the interest out either quarterly or annually, so it doesn't compound, and it's simple, simple interest. So, and you can see the both the sample loan agreement and the information sheet about the fund on our website, laecovillage.org.
Great.
How about next question?
Can people come visit?
Of course, they have been regularly visiting, and we had a dedicated visitors unit until COVID, of course. So, so during COVID, we have not been having visitors, but I have to say, I think that the future of visitors in Eco Village is going to be in our tiny house village on our commercial property. Probably maybe by the middle to late this year, when everyone's been vaccinated, I hope. So but you'll see information about that on our website. And we also have we also send out a notification of events and other interesting things that are happening about once a month or so. So you can get on our mailing list. And of course, when we're open for visitors, you'll be hearing about it that way as well.
Okay, great. How many residents do you have, and how much turnover is there in terms of people coming and going?
Great question. We have 40 intentional members. We never, because we're an old neighborhood built in the early 1920s to the mid 1920s, we never, and our buildings were occupied. We never required anyone to leave. Our first building was 40 units and it was half vacant. So we had plenty of opportunity to retrofit it. And, but we didn't want any of our neighbors to have to, we didn't want to displace people. It's a fairly low income neighborhood and minority primarily. And so we just felt very strongly no one should have to move because we're, you know, having this. So we have 40 intentional community members, that is, that have been vetted now through our 6-month vetting process or so. Sorry, I forgot the second part of the question, which was—
how much turnover do you have? People coming and going?
Turnover. We in our community, and I imagine this is true of many other communities as well, have about the same turnover as Americans in general. Pre-COVID, I think that people generally move in America about once every 5 years. Not everyone, but generally that is kind of the thing. And so that happens here too. Sometimes it's after 1 year, sometimes it's after 10 years. Out of our 40 people, there's probably about a dozen of us who have been here 10 years or longer. And that's about it. It's a normal turnover, and they leave for the same reason that people move for other reasons. They got accepted to graduate school, they fell in love, they got a new job, they got a sick relative, they got sick of us. pretty much what happens in intentional communities, so as well as the general public.
And how about the process for joining the community? And do you have any vetting parameters when you're looking at?
Oh, indeed we do. In the very beginning, which was extremely naive, and the intentional communities movement has learned so much in these past 20 or 30 years. And I want to credit a lot of that to one of our great intentional community heroes, Jeff Kozeny, who's no longer with us. And of course, Laird Schaub, whom you're all going to hear a lot more of, I guess, in an upcoming, and Diana Leave Christian and Tree Bresson, all great names in the intentional communities movement that have helped many of us get on with things. But essentially, in the beginning, you could just say, hey, I want to live more cooperatively and more ecologically. And bingo, you were in. Big mistake. And we paid dearly for it. Thanks to the people like Jeff and Laird and Diana and Tree, we got the help that we needed. And now we have a very almost, too severe vetting process. It takes about 6 months to go through our vetting process, and in 3 or 4 different stages. And you can't live here while you're in our process. So if you want to be in it, sometimes you can start it if you don't live close by, but you can't really get all the way through it until you live near us, so you can hang out with us face to face. And of course, even now, our vetting process, most of the people that are in our membership process are essentially coming to our meetings via Zoom and that sort of thing, if they didn't already know us. So a lot of it is virtual right now.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Lois, for answering those questions. And folks, I know there's still a lot of questions that didn't get answered. We're going to have time at the end to get to those. So hold them.
And I'm going to put our website here in the chat right now. Okay, is that okay?
Yes.
Wait, or did I? Yeah, there it is. Okay,
yeah. I think some people have put it in as well.
Okay, great. LAEcovillage.org or LAEV.org. It'll get to us either way. And great. Lots of stuff about us on YouTube. LA Ecovillage is your search.
And I'll put that in again. And I did earlier, because Lois mentioned Jeff Kozeny, I put a link to a page where you can find out more about him, and also the Kozeny Communitarian Award, which is an award we give out annually in his legacy to amazing communitarians. It's a Lifetime Achievement Award. So if you'd like to nominate someone and find out more, that's the link there. Okay, great. Thanks. Yes, thank you, Lois. That was awesome. Just really awesome to hear all about what you're up to at LA Ecovillage. And now we're gonna go over to Karen Stupski, who's gonna share with us about Heathcote Community. And Heathcote Community was founded in 1965 and is located in Maryland. So Karen, you wanna unmute yourself and share. I know you have a PowerPoint presentation. There it is.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Let's see. But now I don't see the screen. Are you seeing my slides?
Yep, we see them. And
okay.
Looks like you just need to go to the view.
Okay, slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Here we go. Okay, well, hi everyone. So my name is Karen Stupski, and I have lived at Heathcote for 28 years. I joined Heathcote in 1993 because I wanted to create a more socially and ecologically just world. And I thought the intentional communities movement was a good way to do that. I saw it as a way to put my values into practice and build a better world from the ground up. So Heathcote's land is located 30 miles north of Baltimore. The original 37 acres that are shown here were purchased in 1965. And then later in 1997, another 7 acres were added, and Heathcote is located on Piscataway territory. The land was originally, it was purchased by School of Living, and School of Living is a community land trust. So School of Living owns the land and Heathcote owns the buildings. School of Living was founded by Ralph Borsodi, who was a leader in the Back to the Land movement in the 1930s. And Mildred Loomis was another leader of School of Living, and she is known as the founder of Heathcote. The original vision was that Heathcote would be a homesteading education center. And there was an old mill building on the property that was used for workshops and conferences. And a lot of the elders in School of Living were very active. They helped to fix up the mill. You can see here Bill and Margaret Anaker, who sold the land to School of Living, and Grace Lefevre on the right. But in the 1960s, a new generation came into School of Living. It was the hippies. And so Heathcote became known as one of the first hippie communes. And you can see there Mildred with a lot of the hippies that were living there at the time. And I'm told that anywhere from 40 to 60 of them were living on the land at one point. And we have all these outbuildings that people used to live in. And we call them affectionately the shacks, but they have heat and electricity, but no running water. Everyone would use the facilities in the mill. And they were actually quite nice on the inside. People would fix them up. This is the one that I lived in for 10 years. It was the old former chicken coop. So Heathcote's gone through many changes and ups and downs over the years, and over time, the membership changed and it became a women's community from the mid 1980s to around 1994. And here's a picture of from the women's era time with Cynthia Edwards, who was one of the main leaders at the time. And then on the right are, you can see Amoja Three Rivers and Blanche Jackson, who are leaders in the BIPOC communities movement. And they actually lived at Heathcote for a time, and then they left to form their own women of color land-based community in Virginia. So I came in at the end of the women's community era at Heathcote, and there were only 2 women living there at the time, Iva and Marion, and our focus was on healing out of patriarchy. But after about a year, both Iva and Marion decided to move on. And so I was going to be the only one there. But fortunately, I had gotten to know another group that was forming a community. They were called the Gaia Community. And they were a group of like 3 families, heterosexual families with children. And so I was living on land, but had no people, and they had people, but no land. So they moved on to the land. And then gradually more people came, and the community just seemed to thrive. It was almost like magical, the way that people would come, and it all just felt like it really flowed. And at its peak, we had probably about 15 to 20 people living on the land, usually about 3 families with children and 6 to 8 singles at any given time. We improved the mill and did quite a lot of work on it. You can see we expanded our community kitchen and our dining room, and we have a nice conference room and a bunk room. We acquired the adjoining property, which we call the Farmhouse. It had 5 bedrooms, or has 5 bedrooms. And then we built a new straw bale house that was designed, even though our county's zoning is very strict, it could only be a single family home. It was designed to accommodate the maximum we could under zoning. So a family and 2 unrelated adults could live there. We grew a lot of our own food. We had a lot of big gardens, and we had shared meals. We usually cooked together 6 nights a week and ate together in the mill. And we worked together. Every member had to put in 9 hours per week of community labor. And we have an educational mission. So we offered a lot of permaculture workshops. We've sponsored 14 permaculture design courses. We've had interns, over 60 over the years. And we've sponsored a lot of workshops as well. And everything was going great until 2011, when our neighbors complained to zoning about us. And they complained about many things, but a couple of their complaints did have merit. And the county, one of them was we were using a building that the county saw as a residence. We were using it as an education center, and that was a no-no. So the county said we had to stop, and we had to get a special exception to become a school. And we also had to stop living in the outbuildings. So there were many consequences to this complaint. One of the biggest was that we shrank. We lost residential space. A lot of people decided to leave, and then those who remained were cramped in our 3 residential buildings. There was more conflict. So our numbers dwindled. At one point, we were down to 3 people, but now we have 5 adults and 3 kids, and we actually have 5 new membership applications. So hopefully we're going to grow again. And we've been working on getting a special exception to use the mill as a school, and we got approved, except we have to get a new occupancy permit. And before we can do that, we have to meet all the codes and regulations. So we've hired an architecture firm, and they're conducting an assessment right now to tell us everything that we need to do to achieve that. And we're also focusing on developing our farm. And we have a CSA, and we had 12 shares last year. We want to double that this year. And we're also growing turmeric and ginger as cash crops. You can see our farmer Matt there on the left. And we have a big high tunnel that Matt designed and built, mostly with recycled materials and materials from the land. And here's the inside of the greenhouse. Our future goals are that we do want to grow our membership and become a more diverse, just, and inclusive community. We want to resume our workshops on permaculture and cooperative living skills. And we'd like to develop income so that we can earn our livelihood working in our education programs here on the land. We're also working on developing partnerships, because we've realized we can't do it by ourselves. And so we need to partner with other organizations. And we've got an exciting opportunity to grow food for a corner store located in a food desert in Harrisburg, and also offer job training for agricultural careers for those neighborhood residents. So hopefully that'll work out. So what is unique about Heathcote? I would say one of the unique things is that we're part of the School of Living Community Land Trust, which has land in Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. But the thing about School of Living is it holds land for intentional communities and permaculture homesteads. So there's 6 communities in the network, and they're all rural. But an advantage of being an SOL community is that School of Living can help with land access, and the land is protected from the long term, for the long term, even if community members change. There's no chance they're just going to sell the land and pocket the profit. Also, School of Living has a community growth fund and makes loans for capital improvements. There's a network of support, and we have quarterly meetings at the different communities. And School of Living is a 501c3 and can offer fiscal sponsorship opportunities. Another unique thing, I think, compared to a lot of communities, Heathcote is very affordable. We have a good quality of life at a low cost. A single adult could live here for as little as $639 a month. And we all contribute about 9 hours a week of labor to the community. Another thing that's unique, at least in our local area, I don't know of any other organization that is an intentional community farm and an educational center. Although I know nationwide there's others that are like that, but none near us to fill that niche. So in conclusion, just about our membership process. We ask folks to visit first and then fill out a written application. And then we have an interview, a 21-day visit on site, a clearness meeting. Then they can move on site, but it's a 9-month provisional membership. And then there's another clearness meeting. So to determine if it's really a good fit, with check-ins along the way. So I will conclude there.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen. Wow. Just to hear the story and see the photo of a community that's had such a long history and gone through many phases with the hippies and the women's group and now the zoning order. It seems like such a shame that had to happen, but I'm also hearing how you were able to persevere and get through that challenge, and you're on the other side and you're figuring out a way to make it work. So yeah, kudos to you for being resilient as a community. And you first for sticking with it also through all of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we do have some questions. The first one Yeah, regarding that problem with zoning, it seems to be a major block. What do you think about it? How can we make this better? How can other communities work with zoning problems?
Well, I would say right up front, when you're getting started, find out what the zoning is in your area and what is allowed, what is not allowed, and what hoops you're going to have to jump through. You should find that out up front. Sadly, in our case, we didn't do that. And I think there was an ethos of, to not really care about zoning because we're out in the country and in a little hollow and in a valley, and nobody would really care. And even after the zoning complaint, the zoning authorities told us off the record, oh, you're so small, just keep on doing your thing and don't worry about it. But we felt vulnerable because they could complain again. So we felt like we did need to go through the hoops, and that's the best way to protect ourselves against future complaints.
Gotcha. Okay. And I feel like we really do need to do a whole session with you or someone else from School of Living all about that model and community land trusts in general. But for those who are not so familiar with the community land trust model, can you explain that just briefly for us?
Sure. The basic idea is that the land is owned by the community land trust, so it's a collective ownership of land, and then the buildings are owned by the community, or sometimes they're owned by individuals, but in our case, the community owns them. But the underlying economic theory behind it is Georgist economics. Henry George was an economist who lived in the late 19th century, and he believed that private ownership of land was unethical and it was the main cause of poverty in the US. And so the solution he proposed was that land should not be privately owned, and the increase in land value should not go into private pockets. It should be used for the community good. So the community land trust tries to put that into practice on a small scale.
Gotcha. And as your membership grew and then dwindled, it seems the cost of living would have fluctuated as well. Yeah, did it fluctuate? And I suppose if the land is owned by the community land trust, how about the buildings and the rental units?
Sure, the buildings are owned. Well, we have 3 main buildings. They were owned by Heathcote, but actually the way that we financed the straw bale house was a big loan from some members who lived in it. And then when they moved on, they wanted to be paid back. So either the community needed to buy them out or an individual. And we went through a long process. The community couldn't get a loan or anything. Ultimately, I bought it and I was able to get a VA loan because I'm a veteran. And they even made the loan even though it was a leasehold. So that was exciting. So, but now I have a bank loan. So that's not, paying my interest to the bank. I'd rather not do that, but at least we were able to keep it in the community. So yeah, we've had to pay for all the costs of our property with just fewer members. That's true. And so it puts a greater financial burden on each member, but usually a large number of our members tend to be low income and not able to really pay more. So that's been a dilemma. It seems like people that have more assets don't want to live quite as simply as they need to live here at Heathcote, where each adult just gets a room in a group house. So folks who have more assets tend to not want to live here, and we tend to get more folks on a limited income.
Okay, great. All right, last question for you, and also some people had some questions about George and the land trust model, and maybe so if you could put the links to that and also your website in the chat. But the last question, going back to this issue of zoning, Sandy asked, do you think that cooperation with local government and with neighbors can lead to zoning flexibility and acceptance? Like, it sounds like you all didn't have much success with that, but do you think it's possible?
Well, we are really putting an effort into maintaining positive relationships with our neighbors. So that would be step 1, and then with regard to making changes in the zoning code, that's a lot harder to do. They do every few years, the county goes through a rezoning process, but to get something new introduced like eco-village zoning or something, I think that would be very hard. it could be done. There's a lot of good to the zoning that they have, like they're trying to limit development. So even though that it puts a lot of limits on what we can do, it's also good ecologically not to have a lot of sprawling development, you know, and they're trying to protect the farmland and the natural ecosystems. So there is some good about the zoning, but it would be nice. I would love it if we could get something in there for eco-villages, for ecologically friendly development.
Yeah, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right, folks, well, save your questions, more questions for Karen until the end. And next we're going to move on to our other presenter. We have Michael Johnson, who's going to share with us about Ganas community in New York City. So this is another urban community. We went from urban to rural. Now we're back to urban in another big city. And Ganas community was founded in 1980. And Michael is a long-term member. So we're going to hear from Michael all about the community and how it started and his role there. Take it away, Michael.
Well, actually, I'm not going to talk about all about Ganas and the community and how it started. I can address very briefly why it started. But there's a lot of information on the website. And I chose to really laser beam the question of what do people really need to know about starting a community? And so that's really what I'm going to talk to, and it's going to be very narrow focused. But in everything that everyone has heard so far, or any of the other things they've heard about intentional communities, in the background, underneath, around, over, in between, on top of, are the problems people have talking to each other. It's very, very challenging, and it's very core to making a community work. And we started in 1980, not as an intentional community, but as a research project in trying to figure out why is it so difficult for people to talk to each other about the problems they're having. And that was an intense research project for 20 years. And the core of our culture is built around what we learned. And so for me, there is one lesson that stands out above all others in the starting a community. And the group that starts a community has to be able to talk to each other about the problems they have with each other. And talking with each other about those will be the #1 challenge you will have in starting your community, in running your community, and in sustaining your community. It will be the alpha and omega of your effort. It's the #1 challenge of all collective action groups, and it's very difficult. It's easy to say what is necessary to make this kind of communication work well. I will summarize that in terms of 2 things. And I can tell you here that at Ganas, the central group is into its 40th year of learning how to do that. And the emphasis is on the learning. First thing is learning to want to hear and understand each other, especially when there is a conflict. And the second thing is learning to be willing to disclose what is happening for you and what you want, especially in the context of a difficult problem. The first one requires setting aside your conviction on how right you are, and you will always have that conviction. The second one means to be willing to take the risks involved in moving into your vulnerability and disclosing what's going on for you and what you want. So why are these 2 things so difficult to do, you might ask? Or maybe you don't need to ask because you already know it's really difficult. since we don't have 6 to 12 months to address that question here, let me just say this. All of us start out being in deep conflict between our self-centeredness and our cooperativeness. We are always both. That's the nature of being a human being. In addition, the easiest place for self-centered behavior to thrive is the small group. Just think of the mutual blaming that happens when someone feels hurt by someone else. The impulse to attack is virtually immediate, and the impulse to defend is almost as instant. Or, and I'm sure that all of you have dealt with this problem, there is virtually the unsolvable problem of keeping our kitchens clean. It is so easy not to see the mess that I made, but I'll see the one you made. Okay, that's kind of the hard side. Let me close on 2 positive notes. First, there is a very reliable framework for a group to use in dealing with collective problems. And you will find out that almost all relational problems in a community will have collective impact. At Ganas, we call this process compassionate inquiry. To solve a problem, you need to know what the problem is. So know that blame and defend game almost always lacks critical information. And so there are 2 questions to ask to carry out compassionate inquiry. What is happening and what is wanted? And you want to try to get everyone who's involved in a situation working with those 2 questions. The first question seeks for everyone involved to share what they know and find out about as much as possible as to what is going on. To share it and to find out. That can take a long time, much persistence, and a lot of compassion. After all, who gets excited about speaking truth to one's partners or receiving the truth from their partners? So remember the first 2 things, wanting to hear and understand the other, and willing to put yourself out. That's the core to making those 2 questions work. And always beware of the blame game. These 2 questions are designed specifically to help everyone move out of blaming and in wanting to hear and willing to share. With these 2 questions, when these 2 questions begin to get everyone focused on a win-win outcome, your group will begin to hum with positive energy. There will be more willingness for yes and less energy for no. And if this dynamic continues, the discussion will naturally begin to move to the 3rd question. What options are there for solving our problem? Because people are now in a position to do that. The discussion takes that turn because many are now well informed and cooperation has begun to reign. My second positive note is a profound appreciation for what all of you are considering to do to take on. Profound appreciation for what Karen and Lois and Cynthia and Marty have taken on. Collective action is a primary driver of human evolution. We are in the constellation of crises that mark the 2020s of this century because our capacity for small group collective action is too underdeveloped to rise adequately to the occasion. There is something special about small groups. They were the only social environment for most of our 2 million year evolutionary development. Like the cells of our bodies, they need to remain building blocks of modern large-scale societies. That is, your adventure isn't just about your community. And intentional communities are not just about our movement. In the words of the great anthropologist Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. That's what your venture will be about. Thank you. It's hard to make a speech, but.
Thank you, Michael. Oh, I have goosebumps. That was really wonderful and powerful. Thank you. And that's one of the things I love about intentional communities. They really are experimentation centers for figuring out how we can live together and cooperate, and that knowledge needs to and hopefully will come out more into society. If only our government could ask themselves those 3 questions. Yeah, thank you. And maybe could you actually repeat those 3 questions, and we'll try to capture them in the chat because some people didn't get the 3.
What is happening?
Okay, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What is wanted?
What is wanted?
And that means if you've got a group of 10, 12, 15 people and you're trying to sort through some of the issues that Karen's community had to sort through, and I'm sure Lois has been through umpteen thousand of these kinds of struggles, this what is wanted is throughout the whole group. And it evolves and develops and shifts and shapes and all of that. So what is wanted is very complex, and what's going on is very complex. So what is wanted is the second question. And the third question is, what options do we have now that we're together, we want to solve this? What are the options for solving our problem?
Okay, great. Good, and I just put those in the chat for folks. Okay, all right, and we have some questions for you. The first question, does trauma-informed language or learning inform your community interrelations? Like, how much do you look to trauma informed learning or language as your community operates?
Is trauma and what's the other one?
Trauma-informed language or learning.
Okay. We didn't deal with trauma in the way we now understand it, because there's just so much that's developed over the last 15 or 20 years. But we were always working with trauma. All of us have been working with trauma. I mean, we're all traumatized. And there's so many things that come out in our conflicts with each other that are coming out from trauma. And when they are trying to find out what is going on, it isn't just what's going on out there, it's what's going on in here. And much of that will lead back into, trauma, and we were gifted with a very extraordinary person who could work with trauma. And so we learned a lot about that, but not that wasn't the language we used, you know, but it's definitely, you know, at the core. And I think that one of the most important things that groups can do and communities can do is really to develop the expertise and the understanding of how trauma creates trauma, generation after generation after generation. So we need to really understand that and how to work with it, because it can be reversed. Great question.
Guys. Next question. Do you think that different kinds of governance can make a difference? And maybe should all members of the community be required to have some training in different governance methodologies like sociocracy or holacracy? And maybe how does Ganas handle governance? Do you use consensus or something else?
Let me answer the second part first. We operate with what we call a participatory management system, so that every area of work has a manager, and that manager has authority in that system. However, there is a planning group, and the planning group assigns who the manager will be. So there is that counter control to the manager's authority. And then a second counter control is, or accountability process, is that every area intersects with other areas. So there's got to be negotiations to work out what's okay for one area to do. And then the third thing is that if there's any major expense or if there's any big conflicts, that comes back to the planning group. So there's the full authority goes to the person who's the manager so they can act. Yet at the same time, accountability is always there. And what we operate off of more than anything else is consulting. Managers ask in order to find out before they make a final decision. And they're finding out what else is going on and what else is wanted.
See, yes, coming back to that. Okay, and a lot of people are asking about what resources you have available for people who want to learn more about your communication practice and governance practice as a community. And some folks have asked if you or other members of Ganas are available to have conversations about this so they can learn more.
We are available. A number of us are available to do that. In the past, we've actually even gone to some communities and did kind of crisis intervention work, but we haven't done any of that in a long, long, long time. Now we're beginning to talk about COVID has just kind of shifted so many perspectives, and in this period when there's so little we can actually do, we're starting to think of things that we could do that we hadn't thought about before. So then the idea of having some kind of internships is something that has surfaced and that we've started talking about. And if anyone is really interested in following through on that, that could be, push us, poke us along to thinking, more about that.
Okay, great. And is your website the best place people can go to get in contact or to learn more?
Yes. It's very simple. It's Ganas, GANAS.org.
Great.
And let me just say something about the word Ganas. Some of you may have seen the movie Stand and Deliver a long time ago, but it was basically, it was a Hispanic teacher with Hispanic students in Los Angeles. And he had very clear ideas on what their possibilities of learning. And he actually brought this, low income high school students to pass the highest challenging entrance exams in the state of California. And every one of them aced it. And they considered this had to be cheating, and they had to all do it all over again. And they passed it again. And someone asked him, "How do you do this? How are you you're doing this?" And he said, "I provide the focus, they provide the Ganas." And Ganas is the motivation to really go for something when you're really conflicted about it. You really want it, but it's also creating a lot of anxiety. And you've got, you're like this. Ganas is the motivation that breaks through, and you go for it.
Wonderful. Oh, good. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for your sharing, and we'll come back with more questions for you towards the end. Great. And now we go to last but not least.
Oh, can I just add one quick thing?
Of course.
Yeah, we're open to new members. And we have we're almost like Los Angeles is at the other end of the universe to New York City. Our acceptance policies are almost as far from the LA Eco Village, where we tend to be if we have the space and you can cover your expenses, so come on in. It's not quite, it's not 100% that liberal, but it's very flexible. Thank you.
Okay, good. Glad you added that. Thank you. Okay, now we go to Marty with Liberty Village. And you're going to share all about Liberty Village, which was founded in 1998 and is also located in Maryland. And I've actually visited Liberty Village for an FIC board meeting some years back. So I remember it well, and I'm glad to have you here and presenting. So I'm gonna make sure you're unmuted, and I think you might need to unmute.
There we go. Okay.
Got it. All right, and I'm going to share my screen and queue up your presentation. Just give me a moment here.
Well, I can start talking.
Okay.
Okay. And Cynthia's going to advance my slides for me, so I'll just be saying next every now and then. So hello, and I'm Marty Weatherly. I am a founding member and a founding partner and a member of Liberty Village Co-Housing right near Frederick, Maryland. I'm a facilitator there. I train in facilitation and consensus, and I'm a life coach and a consensus coach and a community coach. And this is our community as it is today. And now, can you see my arrow if I use this as a pointer?
No.
No? Okay. So I'll just talk about it then. All right. So we bought the land in 1995 and spent about 2 years. It took that long to get the zoning changed to planned unit development. And then we started building in 1999. And the house straight ahead of you there, that's a duplex home. That was the first home that was built. We self-developed, so we did not use a developer. We raised $500,000 to be able to build all the roads and all the infrastructure that was needed for 38 homes, which is what our community will be if we ever get it completely finished. And I'll get to that in a minute. We put in all the water and sewer pipes, all the internet, and we then started building in 1999, and by 2001, we had 18 homes built. But then, unfortunately, the county stopped all building. Now, if we had had a developer and had been able to pay all the fees up front, we might have been able to continue building. I can't say that for sure, but I think so. So at any rate, and then by the time they were allowed building again, it was the recession. So we have not finished our community. Now you can change the slide, please. This is another one of our duplex homes. So the first thing I want to let you know in our history is that building a community is a lot of work. It's a lot of energy. It will take a lot longer than you think it will, and it will cost a lot more money than you think it will. Yes, Michael's nodding his head. Yeah. And now you can change the slide. Here is our architect, Ron, he's one of the professionals that has done almost all of our architecture work. He has done all of our architecture work for all our homes. And we are now 32 adults and 20 children. So we are very we are spread out in age from 1 to 8 in our 80s. And all right, so now I'm going to show you a video, 1-minute video about Liberty Village.
Residents of Liberty Village can choose from 4 popular models of homes, including handicapped accessible models, to build on their purchased lots. Every house in our community is a duplex, meaning 2 individual homes share a common center wall and a common front porch. These design elements are central to providing that close neighborly contact and preserving open spaces that are essential to the concept of co-housing. So too is our larger common house, which is the heart of our village community. This building provides space for activities such as common meals, which are held 2 or 3 times a week, as well as social events and community management meetings. Our home sizes range from 1,000 to 2,500 square feet and typically start in the low $300,000 range. 10 lots are currently available for purchase and construction.
Okay, and we can go, yeah.
Liberty Village can choose from
So
4.
now if you hit it again, it'll go to the site. Yeah, there we go. This is our site plan, and as you can see, there's 15 acres of open land. Now I want to stress, because we've had so many different kinds of communities, ours are private homes. So all the ones that are yellow are already built, and they're all duplexes, all except one, actually, most of them. And those are private homes that are sold on the open market. The ones that are yellow are already built. The ones that are red, the one that's nearest the parking lot down in the bottom is available to build. And the ones that are the other 4 red ones, which would be 8 units, we have another holdup with the zoning and with the county. And we hope that that will be resolved this year. And the blue ones are in the future. So now the next slide. We are very multi-generational, as I said, and those of us who are over retirement age love to live with families and with children. Next slide. Our uniqueness that I feel is that we're a great mix of rural and also close to urban settings. This is what we call our back 40. This is our open area with a chicken coop in it. And we have Horse Farm on the other side. We have the Appalachian Trail close by, and we have Frederick, which is a wonderful city with all shopping that's 7 miles away, with arts and theater and wonderful restaurants. And then we are 45 minutes away from Baltimore and from Washington, D.C. So we have all of that available to us. Okay, next slide. Our latest project is Fires at Night. We have a fire pit here. This is one of our teens busy chopping wood, and it's a wonderful community project that we can have during the time of COVID when we really miss our meals together. So next one. Now, meetings, and I want to stress what Lois has said, which is know what you are joining, and what Michael has said about a community that works collaboratively is a community that's going to require personal growth as well as collaboration in the community. So to walk into a meeting like this, that we're operating by consensus or any kind of collaborative decision-making, you have to walk in being ready to honor and respect anybody else's point of view. It might be someone you don't particularly like. It might be a point of view that you do not agree with, but in consensus or any collaborative decision-making, conflict is actually welcomed. And that is not the way we work in our society today, as we all know. So conflict is welcome because it brings out the point of view and it gets you down to what's really important. Consensus, first of all, I want to clarify, consensus is not governance. Governance is different. Consensus is the way you is consenting together. It is not unanimity. It is not compromise. It is not giving in, last man standing, because I beat you all up until you all say I'm too tired, go ahead and do what you want. That's not what it is. It's creatively coming together for what is best for the whole community at that time. I might not agree with it. I might think, well, I have a better idea. But at that time, it's what's best for the whole community at that time. And that is, when I first heard about co-housing, I was sold on it because of the idea of consensus. And if we can bring up a generation with that, we will change the world. Next slide, please. Oh, and I think we have another, we have another one of the kids outside blowing bubbles on we might have been having a meeting inside while they were outside at that time. Okay, next one. Mid-Atlantic Co-Housing is a regional nonprofit organization that we created to support co-housing in the Mid-Atlantic area. And we wrote this book and produced this DVD that I highly recommend to any group who wants to form a cooperative community of any kind with a developer. So this is case studies from the developers who have developed more co-housing than anyone else. And it's a great way to find out how you can work with a developer. Find a developer who already has the zoning, who already has the property. And if the developer is sold on the idea of co-housing, learn how to work with them so that you can build a community that's profitable to them and that gives you what you're looking for. So next slide. This is the name of the book and DVD and the cost. You can order it from me. It's kind of hard to see my email there. I'm going to put my Mid-Atlantic Co-Housing email. I'm going to put Mid-Atlantic Co-Housing website, Liberty Village website. I'll put them on the chat. I'll put my email in there. And I am passionate about consensus decision-making and about supporting communities as a coach. So if anybody wants to contact me for anything like that, I'll put those 3 pieces of information in the chat. That's it.
Thank you, Marty. What a nice presentation.
Let's see, did I forget anything?
Did you forget anything? Yeah, I loved one of that unique features of your community being the duplexes and how it makes so much sense from sharing resources and the ecological aspect and the social cohesion. So I really like that, and all the open space you have. It's beautiful.
Yes, yeah, it's beautiful. I take a walk back there.
Oh, okay, so I bet we have some questions. Okay, so are there community fees, common costs after someone buys their home?
That's for me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we have a budget meeting every year when we set the budget together, and our budget now is $185 for each household. So that's the members of Liberty Village Community Association are the homeowners, and we set the budget. And right now our budget is $185 a month, and that covers insurance, taxes, the upkeep. We are now renting a common house because we haven't built our common house yet, and upkeep, lots of snow removal machinery, lots of tractors for grass cutting, and education and fun, and whatever else we need.
Nice. And Erin has 3 questions for you that are kind of related. Did you chat with the zoning folks before buying your land? Were there any other sites that you considered, and what made you choose your site?
Yes, I was not a part, but the original 5 members put an option down on another property, and they unfortunately then spent several $1,000s each on engineering, coming up with site plans, and then couldn't get the property. So then their group, when that happens, it usually cuts down a group by about half. And that's what happened. There were people who dropped out who just said, we're not going through this anymore. That was part of the 3 years leading up to when they bought our property. Yes, we had our wonderful Tom Loft was in the county. He actually helped the county write a planned unit development so that we could be a planned unit development. And our other wonderful founder, Merlin, went around to everybody around us, introduced himself, invited them to our meetings, and we had many meetings every other Sunday for years, when my friend and I would drive out from Rockville and come out to Frederick, and we'd have our meetings in a church, and we had marketing and all kinds of things. So yes, we took care of the neighbors and we took care of the zoning. Okay. There's still holdups. Right now, the holdup is something about the floodplain that is very hard to get resolved, and we're going to have to get that resolved somehow.
Okay, someone had a question about that.
Yeah.
Do you have any resources for learning more about consensus decision making?
Oh, I certainly do. And I recommend Laird Schaub's programs. Absolutely. Most of us, he worked with us a lot. I also have, I'll make a plug for this book, which is,
Yay.
Yeah, which is written by Jana Ludwig from your organization, and Karen Gibning, the Cooperative Culture Handbook.
Nice.
You can get it on Amazon, and I'm sure you can get it from the websites too. This is because this is specific exercise, specific things to do in a community in different situations. That's why I like it so much.
Awesome. Yeah, and I just put the link to that book.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good resources. Let me see what other questions.
There was a question as to something about the here on chat. There's a question, something about you buy the house yourself from the owner, and then you become a member of the Liberty Village Community Association, and then you pay dues once a month, depending on the budget that we set up every year.
And what is your membership process for someone joining? What sort of application?
Well,
process?
yeah, you really are buying directly from the other owner. However, the owners we have to make sure this happen, because we want, like Lois said, we want people to know what they're joining. So we have to be sure that they know what co-housing is. We did have one owner who joined without knowing much about co-housing, and it really doesn't work because they're not involved. And so even though it's going through a private sale from one owner to the other, we have them come. We now have a Zoom meeting with other members who live here, so that we can actually see if we're a good fit, like somebody mentioned. Find out, what are you looking for? What are we looking for? Make clear about how we do our work, make clear about how we make our decisions and what it takes. And we will take you on an appropriate tour now. And we just unfortunately can't have you come to our wonderful community dinners that we used to have. So hopefully that'll clear up pretty soon.
Yeah, let's hope. Okay, I think that's all of the questions for the moment. I actually want to use our remaining time to move into our panel discussion,
Yeah.
and then we'll open it up to more preliminary type questions. So, let me see here. I want to ask you all just a few questions about the process you and your communities have gone through of starting and sustaining yourselves over the year. And so my first question is, what do you think has been the most challenging part of starting and sustaining your community? And popcorn style, whoever wants to answer can unmute and share your thoughts on the most challenging part.
Are we all on? Oh, I guess I'm unmuted, so can you hear
Yeah,
me? Well, I'll go ahead and talk then. The most challenging part of these problems that we have with the zoning, and in the beginning when we couldn't build more than 18, I think if we'd had a developer, although we would have had to deal with that differently, and could have paid for all these fees up front for 38 homes, which would have been, another, I don't know, $1 million or something like that. I think that would have made a difference. So I would say the zoning, the all of the things that have to go through to develop a piece of property. I'm a nurse, so I didn't know any about this. This is a real eye opener, what it takes to build a community.
Gotcha.
Well, I would say in my case, it was going through kind of a 5 to 7 year period of the extraordinary tensions that generally in most organizations that are generally come up between founders and those that come after. And so to be, to be so despised that you would walk into a room where there are hate messages written, where people would see you coming and they turn around and walk the other way. And it was a very, very devastating time for me personally, because I'm kind of a silly person and I like to have fun, but you couldn't, in that period of development, one could not be who one was. You had to just be totally straight and professional at every turn. And it was a very difficult time. Most founders at that point would give it all up, throw up their hands and say, okay, that's enough. And many founders do. And as we know, intentional communities, like other kinds of businesses, so to speak, for the most part, don't succeed beyond a few years. But that was something that I got through thanks to the FIC and its group of extraordinary trainers, as I've mentioned before. Laird was certainly important, Diana was important, and Tree, getting us through that period. And having the people that were the most divisive and the most ugly leave. And they all wanted to leave, but they couldn't afford to leave. So we arranged to help them leave, so to speak. So that was, from my perspective, the most challenging. Everything else was simple compared to that. And it was decided that my organization, which it was and is the developer of the Los Angeles Eco Village, would not transfer ownership of our buildings to our co-op and our land trust until the culture of the community was congenial. We agreed, it's okay, as you've heard again and again here today, it's okay to agree to disagree, but you've got to do it respectfully and be congenial with one another. You don't have to love everyone, but there has to be that congeniality. And so we got through it, and today we've got some very intense disagreements, but we love each other anyway. and mostly pre-COVID, we're on hugging terms with most of us. So my fantasy is we will have the big post-COVID group hug someday. So that was my big challenge.
Thank you for sharing. And it's interesting to hear the role FIC played in that. As
Oh,
a,
totally.
yeah, as someone who's
Totally. It was
improving
all
in this
FIC.
generation. Okay, yeah. Okay,
I picked the one that we're having currently. I mean, I have a whole long list I could choose from in terms of very challenging issues and times, et cetera, et cetera. But the one we're having currently is that, excuse me, Ganas has a very unusual structure. There's a thing called the core group. And the core group is like this family in which everyone is throws in their money, their time, their energy, and we own all the property in that. Most of us, or a good hunk of us, are like in 70s. I turned 79 yesterday, so I'm going to catch up with you pretty soon. But it's like, so what are we going to do with this world that we created? Because we're all aging very rapidly, and we have not figured out a way to pass this on. And we were just really beginning to dig into it when the whole COVID thing hit, and then you have to redo the whole community in order to to manage the COVID situation. So we haven't really gotten back to it. And it's as one person in this this really strong conversation that we got into, I don't even know how to think about this. How to pass this whole thing on. So that's really one of the big challenges that we're having right now.
Well, I think what I found most challenging is the intersections of zoning and conflict. Because prior to the zoning complaint, I always felt like we were really good at dealing with conflict, that we paid a lot of attention to it. We were very proactive. We'd have like 3 or 4 community retreats every year to be proactive in building our relationships, building our skills. We had a lot of processes for dealing with conflict. We make decisions by consensus. We did a lot of trainings, all that. I felt like we were really good. But then it was almost like the universe said, oh, you think you're good? Oh, well, take this, take this. They kept sending us harder and harder conflicts. And it's like the zoning complaint definitely triggered more conflict, because not only was there conflict with the neighbor, but when the community was smaller, there were fewer people there to hold the conflict, less of a container. Some of our community members who were more skilled with conflict left. And then the physical spaces were different, that we were sharing these houses in closer quarters, and some personalities that did okay in their own little outbuilding didn't do as well in a shared house. So it was like things just got more intense. And then I think also some personalities are just more challenging. Certain personalities that tend to engage in certain behaviors. There's certain behaviors that just don't work in community. And maybe certain people are just not really adapted to community. So we've started focusing more on trying to be more intentional in our screening. And we're especially trying to determine people's level of emotional intelligence during the membership process. Because we've identified that as a key factor for success in community. And a key factor in enabling one to deal with conflict positively. So, check.
Yeah, I'm noticing some themes in all of these responses. One being the physical, like the actual laws, the government, the legal barriers to getting a community started and developing further. And then the other just being the social aspect and the conflict. So yeah, both. Okay, so then on a more optimistic note, what would you say has been the most rewarding part of the journey of creating community?
Well, I'll start again. We can go around. When I moved in, I was so excited. I felt like I had moved. I felt like I did when I went away to camp in the summertime. And I think what made me feel that way was going away to camp. I was seeing my friends. I was in a great place for a whole lot of fun, and with friends who I knew from years before. I went to the same camp 3 years in a row. And when I moved in, I just felt like I could look outside and everyone that I saw was my friend. I knew them. I felt like I was home. And that's been there all the time. And we're having some challenges now with people having, from what Michael said, integrating new people into the community. And but I just love it, and I'm not going to live anywhere else.
I can add on to that because I would say a lot of the same things that Marty said. There's no way in which I would have had the opportunity to do and connect with so much stuff that I have been able to through the community. We have 3 businesses. I would have never worked in a business in my life. We've done a lot of work in the businesses in terms of recycling, and that opened up a whole new world to me. We've had, I would say, something in the neighborhood of at least 1,000 people that have passed through this community. We've been up to 100 people and down to, we're now down at 60. We settled in at 60. We've had to go through the buying of houses. We've had to go through the zoning issues. All of those kinds of things I would have never experienced. I would have never had the opportunity to know how all kinds of ways that the world works. And there's 1,000 people. I mean, there's been some utterly fascinating human beings that have come through here, both extremes. I mean, some really, really awful and really wonderful. And one example just jumps up at me. After the Tiananmen Square, we had 5 Chinese people who left China that ended up here. One of them was the son of one of the generals that worked with Mao Zedong in the Long March. And at one point, he came to visit his son. And so we had this whole long conversation about the Long March. And it's just fascinating, that you open the doors, and you've got all this kind of stuff that passes through. So I just, I could never have had the expansive experience living a regular, normal life.
Well, my most rewarding experience is having reached a point where I am truly not needed and I could die tomorrow and the community would go on.
Wow.
I'm making very close friends with worms because my fantasy is that I'll get to be buried in the courtyard without without being in a box or anything. And but I think that's really why I engaged in the acquisition of this adjacent commercial property that might, keep me going for another decade or so. So, but that is a wonderful feeling to be a founder. And I think it's every founder's, I don't know, I may be exaggerating, but I expect that most founders dream of the day that what it is that they founded will go on even if they're not there. And so that is a very, very rewarding, exciting, and freeing in so many ways. Like, I really could leave. I could come and live with any of you, maybe, if you'd have me. Or I know there have been any number of communities. Oh, Lois, come live with us. But I'll probably stick it out here. So that's it. That's it. How about you, Karen?
Well, I would say the equally rewarding would be the people, the relationships with all the different people who have passed through, the ability to get so close to people through the living and working together. And then just the incredible learning opportunities that you have in community. I've been pushed and stretched and challenged to learn so many different things. So
All of us.
check.
All of us. Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
I think Karen had a really important note that the wonderful relationships are the ones that really stretch you. It's by no means all joy. I mean, it's like you really get into a relationship and, all kinds of things will happen you're not expecting.
Well, I tell so many people that ask these questions, I have a very simple formula for success. And
let me take notes.
Take note, very simple. To have a very clear vision about what you want to do.
Yes.
To have a good plan and make sure you have flexibility built into your plan. To stay grounded, because generally people that have a vision are not always so grounded, and oftentimes very grounded people have no vision. So stay grounded and persevere. And some of us, it takes a little longer than others, but if after 50 years or so nothing's happened, maybe you should kind of rethink your vision. But for the most part, vision, planning, groundedness, and perseverance will pretty much get you anything you ultimately want to do.
Awesome. Well, that's a great segue into the last question I have for you, which is, what advice do you have for someone who is thinking of starting a community? And Lois, do you want to add anything? That seems to sum it up, but if you have any other bits of wisdom you might tack onto that.
Humor is important.
Yes. Yes.
And pretty much the key points that that Karen and Michael and Marty have made, honesty, truth, being forthright with one another. But perhaps in addition to all those personal relationships you're going to develop with your future community mates, perhaps the best advice is, no matter where you decide to do this, make sure that you get to know your future neighbors. So all those zoning and legal and all those other, and also your local politicians, make friends with your elected representatives. Even when you don't need or want anything, just make friends with them and go contribute to their political campaigns, go to their town hall meetings, ask them questions, get to know their planning staff. Very, very helpful. We have excellent relationships with our mayor, with our council person, with many different departments of the city. So, yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Some
of those lessons are very hard if you haven't done that work. As some of you have experienced that lessons. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I would add this to what you were saying, because I agree with all of that. And that is that I simply had no idea what I was getting into from the beginning. And it has been one step at a time. And it's like, you don't know where things might go, but there's going to always be a next step that you can take. And then from there will be another step you can take. And when you look back, it's like, how the hell did we get here? Because and without losing the vision. The vision becoming reality, I had no idea what it would actually turn out to be.
Well, sometimes if you plot too carefully, you know, you've got this vision and, you know, and it's way out here someplace. And if you are too bound into the exact steps that it's going to take to get there, you will never start.
Exactly.
Just keep the vision going and take and be flexible in your plan, and you'll get there. But I don't think I you know, I would have, if I knew what it was going to take. No, but you're right. The things that you learn along the way, amazing, and the people you meet and the people you love, amazing, wonderful.
Well, one of the things I always suggest to people who want to start a new community is to consider joining an existing community, to maybe
Yes.
question whether they really need to start a new community in order to meet their needs, because it's very, very hard to start them. And then there's so many communities out there that already exist, but that are struggling. And so for the movement as a whole, it would be good to strengthen our existing communities. And there's a lot that maybe you can get that same experience of creativity and vision and getting something going at an existing community by helping it to go through a tough transition or helping it to reinvent itself. So that's one suggestion. But if you really are set on starting your own, I would say really focusing on getting the training in the conflict resolution and facilitation and the social skills of community building, and make sure you've got a solid skill set there. So,
And if you're not going to go live in a community, arrange your life so that you can take 6 months or so to travel around and visit different communities for at least 2 or 3 days or a week or two at a time. That is something I frequently recommend to people.
And I would add, yes, I think Karen is absolutely right on. I think one of the things that people have to, I love the idea of joining a community rather than building one, because that makes complete sense. To make a sustainable community, it takes hiring professionals. I think that whether it's a developer or other, there are people who've gone through it who are actually now professionals, consultants, hiring people to plan the bricks and mortar, but also to plan the social structure and learn about conflict resolution and all those things. Hiring those people, using them from the very beginning so that everyone knows what you're getting into and so that you have support along the way. That's what I would think.
I had not thought of the point that Karen was making, but I think it is really a very, very important point. And it kind of touches on the point that I made about, you know, this whole thing is about changing the world. It's not about creating your own place necessarily. But I would just want to tag on to it though, that if you really set on starting your own community, spend 6 months in another one. And that's a way to learn how to do it. There's nothing better than firsthand experience. And we've had some people who have done that and went on to start other communities. But I like that emphasis on why not join ones that are struggling. They need the help. That, you know, I mean, it's not like you're making a bad investment. You assess that out very carefully. But let's make the movement work. But this whole business of the small group is one of the most important things to develop across the globe.
Wonderful. I have trying to take notes of all these bits of wisdom I'm hearing. It's excellent. And I I'll make another plug there, folks, for our online courses that we're really thrilled to be able to offer to you on facilitation, conflict resolution, and also my course on how to find a community and join one if you determine that maybe you want to go down that route before the starting an intentional community route. And I put that link there to ic.org/learn. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is we have scholarship opportunities. For our course on starting a community, we gave out, I think, 20 full or partial scholarships. So we really want to make this an accessible thing. We are here to help lift up the movement. That's our first priority. And I loved hearing all of you talk about this. It's been excellent. I'm also going to put into the chat the link to our evaluation form for this event, so you can give us feedback, tell us what you liked, what you want to see more of going forward. So I'll put that link into the chat now. And we're going into our final 10 minutes here. So we will hear, the final things you each have to say, and also if there are burning questions still from the audience, and especially questions that are applicable maybe to all of our panelists or would be really good information for everyone to hear, I'd encourage you to post those questions now. And Michael, you had something to add.
Yeah, mine isn't a question. I just, I thought you were going to wrap it up and say, okay, it's time to go. And
But no, say your piece.
And I wanted to make sure that I said this. You've done a fantastic job, and I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Aw, thank you. That's nice. Wonderful. Okay. There has been actually one question, and maybe we can wrap up on this question. A lot of people have been asking, like, it seems that the people who make up your community are really critical, the individuals and their communication skills, emotional intelligence. So how do you go about determining whether you're starting a community in a group or bringing in new members? How do you go through that critical assessment process of determining if someone is really a good fit for your community? Yeah, anything you can offer on that question? Marty?
Well, because our homes are private homes, we can't stop people from buying in. And I think even if we could, what my experience has been over the 25 years I've been involved with this is that we always have a spectrum of people in our community, from the ones who seem, on the one side, the ones who seem to be the problem, to the ones who seem to be just great. And that's included some people who were dealing with mental health issues. And so my feeling is that spectrum is always going to be there. And when people say to me, that person is the problem, if they would leave, we would be fine, I say, no, we wouldn't, because the next person in line would just move over and take that spot. So the thing that we have to find, that I find challenging, that is actually what we're working on right now, is in a consensus community or a collaborative community, when you have somebody who is complaining a lot or who is the problem, how do we, number one, respect and honor that person for what they're going through? And number two, don't let them just derail us from doing our job, because it's very easy to get backbiting into someone who's complaining a lot. And then all we do is just exacerbate the situation. Then we get to be just like what we're complaining about. We're always complaining about that person. So how do you, as a community then, and there are ways to do it with consensus, be able to deal with someone who, for instance, blocks a lot of things? Now, I have a whole issue with the word block, but there are answers to that. But communities have to be willing to deal with it. They have to say, what are we going to do if somebody wants us all to be vegans and we don't want to be vegans? And how do we handle that? And you got to talk about that. And that's part of the personal development we've talked about. So that's what I think. I don't know. Did I answer the question?
Like,
I think that for Ganas, over the years, there's just been this ongoing trial and error process. You don't say no unless there's a very good reason to say no. And if there's a lot of problems to get to a resolution, you keep working at it.
Yes.
I've got problems with people I've been together. We've been together for 30 years. And we're not really going to resolve some of that conflict. But we respect each other, and we keep from triggering each other. And when we do trigger each other, other people come in and say, "Hey guys, wait a minute, this is your old stuff." But it is to avoid the problems is debilitating. The problems are the grist for the mill. It's how you develop your ability to work with problems is by having you don't have to go make problems. I mean, the problems are all going to be there.
That's amen. Perfect.
But you don't say, okay, you're a problem, you got to go. And that was one of the first things that we laid down is no rejection. We had to back off of that because it was a little too radical. But there was the basic feeling, the spirit. You don't reject someone because they're a problem. You try to figure out what you can do about it. Mm. We've learned so much because of that orientation.
Mm. Well, I guess where we've come to being a very small community, and in the last few years especially, we've experienced a number of behaviors that were just really negatively impacting either individuals or the well-being of the community. And if a member is not willing to follow community policy, and if they repeatedly engage in behavior that negatively impacts others, even after receiving feedback, it felt like it just wasn't a good fit. And it was like, usually, I mean, I believe in the dignity of all people, that all people are inherently good and all that, but I guess that doesn't mean that I necessarily want to live in close proximity and with them day to day. And if I don't trust them and I don't really want to be around them, and they're not respecting our community enough to honor our community agreements, then it feels like it's not a good fit. So I guess we really rely on our 9-month provisional period, because people can usually keep up good behavior and be in the honeymoon period for quite a few months, but it's usually within that 9-month period we'll get to see underneath the surface and any problematic behavior surface. So
I agree there has to be a boundary, but you put in the effort to see what's possible, and when you reach the boundary, that's it. Mm-hmm. But you have to, you don't know what might happen until you don't. It's a failure. Okay, it failed this time, but you've learned a lot anyway. But there has to be the boundary. You can't go on living with a lot of misery.
I just remembered one thing we did was we were struggling so much around some of these issues that we created an advisory board, and we invited a number of people with wisdom that know our community and also have a lot of wisdom themselves to help us and advise us on some of these issues when we were struggling with a difficult conflict or a difficult behavior. So that has really helped, because sometimes when you're right in the middle of it, it's hard to see it in a larger context. And we also reach out to experts like LAERD or whatever. Sometimes I'll call and ask for a consultation. so check.
So I would just say in our case, because of our extended vetting process, while you're in it, you have a liaison of one of our existing members, and they're in touch with you on a very regular basis, and you're in touch with them. And once you're assigned a liaison, there's an expectation that the applicant is going to be essentially reaching out to the liaison at every corner. And if they don't, if they just have submitted their questionnaire and they've been on a tour and maybe come to a meeting or two, or maybe a potluck here or there, but otherwise we don't hear from them, that's a clue. And when the liaison, in discussion with the applicant, they decide that they are ready to be kind of greenlit into the next step of our process, they have to agree that that is a good next step. And then from there, it's into the next step would be becoming a provisional member, which is the point at which you could move into housing that we own, or even be a provisional member and move into market rate housing in the neighborhood. But at that point, it's kind of the community is asked, is that person a good fit for us? And are we a good fit for that person? And those discussions become quite deep, and some questions that are asked of the applicant can become quite personal and telling. And that's very, very rare after 6 months of vetting that we reject anyone, but once in a while we do. And we are always very, very straightforward with what the issues are with the person. And sometimes they go away and never want to speak to us again. And sometimes they'll go away and work on the thing and then come back and they're accepted. So, so that's how it goes for us. Yep. In terms of, I think the question was.
Yeah, these were great responses. I'm just, folks in the chat are saying this has been very helpful. So thank you all. And thank you for everything you shared. This has been so rich. And especially with this last question, I'm really hearing how the process is held with a lot of care and respect and openness to trying to make it work, despite the differences, despite the challenges. And I think that's such a, if only, our society, especially right now, could embrace more of that community spirit and openness and respect. So yeah, wonderful. Okay, well, that's a wrap. Thank you each again so much.
Thank you all for being here. It was really great engaging with you.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
thank you, Cynthia, for terrific.
Thank you. Yes.
And
Yeah, you did a great job.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thanks for all the good questions. Oh, look at that appreciation in the chat. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put that evaluation form in again.
Cynthia, it would be great to know who all the participants were, because I don't think that it shows in the participants list. So anyway, it's always nice to know who was there. Who did someone actually read our electronic notification and they're here because they saw it? So anyway, that's great. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you everyone for coming, and hope to see you again.
Great.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.